Hello there. Welcome to Notes on Nonprofits. I'm so glad you're here. I'm Alyce Lee Stansbury. I'm your host, and I appreciate you making time during your lunch hour to be a part of Notes on Nonprofits. Special shout out to the folks at Women Wednesdays. We welcome you as well and glad you're here. I'm very excited about today's show. If you've heard me once, you've heard me say that the success of a nonprofit organization is directly correlated to the strength and effectiveness of its board of directors. And today we have a great friend of mine and a consultant working with nonprofit boards of all shapes and sizes. And so I'm really excited to welcome Hardy Smith to the show, who will be our guest today. Hardy is a leadership consultant and a very accomplished speaker and the author of Stop the Nonprofit Board Blame Game. So please help me welcome my friend Hardy Smith.
Alyce Lee, thank you so very much for an opportunity to visit with you and your Notes on Nonprofit audience. And
Yep.
I look forward to this. And audience folks, I'll share with you, Alyce Lee is one of my favorite besties. And she is one of the great things about working in the nonprofit space that she and I share is you get to meet wonderful, wonderful people like Alyce Lee Stansbury. And if you don't know anything about Alyce Lee beyond your own personal interaction, Alyce Lee is known nationwide for the level of expertise, the results that she generates, and she is a highly, highly regarded individual. So by paying attention to Alyce Lee, you will learn something and get great benefit. Again, Alyce Lee, thank you for an opportunity to visit with you today.
Thank you so much, Hardy. I'll send you the money for all that. Thank you so much, friend. I appreciate all that you said, and I feel the same about you. And I agree with you that this work is wonderful work. It's challenging work, but you do meet some amazing people working as leaders of nonprofits, serving on boards, funders, consultants, collaborators, and you're definitely one of them. And I'm really glad we're having this conversation. And again, I want to welcome everybody. If you are just joining us, welcome to Women Wednesdays. Welcome to our friends on Notes on Nonprofits. I know this is running on a couple of LinkedIn pages, so welcome. Please say hello in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. And as we go along, Hardy and I really would love to hear your comments, your feedback, your questions, right, Hardy? So don't be shy. If you're watching, please say hello and share your feedback and ask questions because we definitely want to hear from you. We want to make this as much of a conversation as we can. So let's start by learning a little bit more about you, Hardy. So since I'm your friend and I do know you a little bit, I know you have a long career and story in NASCAR racing. And I'm sure you get this question, like, how did I get from NASCAR racing to nonprofit boards? So I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about that story.
Well, thank you, Alyce Lee. And it's probably the top question I get is, Hardy, how in the world did you go from nonprofits or from NASCAR to nonprofits?
Right.
It's a 30-year long story, so I'll give you the condensed version.
Yeah, we do need the short version.
I think in a nutshell, Alyce Lee, I had a very fabulous, amazing, and still hard to believe 30-plus year career in the world of NASCAR racing. And the significance of how that connects, I think it's positioned me well for working with nonprofit organizations. And here's why I feel that.
Okay.
When I was in that high performance world, my role was to identify problems before they existed and make sure they didn't happen.
Right.
And at the same time, work very diligently to identify potential opportunities that the company could be taking advantage of.
Mm-hmm.
And during that career, I worked nationwide, and dealt with local issues, state issues, regional issues, and issues at the federal level in Washington.
Right.
And I worked with not only NASCAR, but I worked with all of motorsports in the United States as their representative for dealing with governmental relations issues that might affect motorsports of any form.
Okay.
Now, I was also involved with the in the big growth run up that motorsports experienced.
Right.
So I was involved from a community relations, boots on the ground, go in first, establish a beachhead, if you will, with community leaders and kind of explain who the heck these NASCAR people are and what this is all about, and
Right.
why it could be having a track, a new speedway in their community would be beneficial. So I was doing all those community outreach activities way before like the construction people actually came in and started building.
So I'm hearing some parallels already to nonprofit.
And in all of that, I was also involved in the planning of not only new facilities like I've just mentioned, but the growth of existing facilities such as the Daytona International Speedway and where I am now in Daytona Beach. I started out in Talladega at the Speedway there. But the growth and the planning, the strategic corporate planning of the organization itself, of some of the and building and growing some of the country's largest spectator event activities and the facilities themselves.
Venues.
So another key element to that whole NASCAR experience, NASCAR, when you win a race on Sunday, and the first thing you do is you tear down your car because you bolt by bolt, nut by nut, because you want to find out why you won. Right. So you can make sure you do that again next week.
Right.
And if you finish second through, 35th, 40th, and anybody who's familiar with Ricky Bobby knows that second, anywhere from second back is like second is first loser. So, and then it just goes downhill from there. So you tear down your car to find out why the heck you didn't win.
Why you didn't win, right?
So there's a very contrarian, challenging point of view in the world of NASCAR. You certainly accept, but you do verify. You challenge and ask why and show me proof and how did that work? Well, in my time in the world of NASCAR racing, while all of that NASCAR background was assimilating in my development, I was also working with community groups, nonprofits, chambers of commerce, associations, again, nationwide. And that was both professionally and personally, just because I like that work. And I have always liked that work.
Me too.
Before NASCAR involvement, I was extremely involved in community type activities at a local, state, and national level. So now we get to the nonprofit world. When I had the opportunity to create my own consulting and speaking business, I'm doing exactly the same things now for nonprofits across the country that I did for NASCAR as a company. And so I believe that I bring a different mindset. In all due respects to all of my friends who have made a long time career in the world of nonprofits, I'm not from your world. I'm maybe from a different planet. I am not from your world. And so I have a different mindset.
Yeah.
And so, and we'll get into this a little more later, but when you talk about best practices, and I challenge those best practices, and I'll be sharing in just a little bit why I do that. So I think I feel like I bring a point of view that's different, that's challenging, And because of my background, I know it's important to be able to explain, okay, don't just tell someone you got a problem, be able to show them how to fix it.
Right. And how
And
your organization is, yeah,
that's
how
what
your
I enjoy
organization
doing.
is solving it. Absolutely. Well, I appreciate that. And I do think, a critical eye, if you will, is helpful. And I think I agree with you on the best practices thing. Sometimes I think best practices are a nice way of saying we've done it this way forever, and so this is the way we think it ought to be. And with my background in working with nonprofits and fundraising and governance, some of those best practices, ones that I learned, back in 1492 when I started in this business, a lot of those we have thrown out the window because
Right.
they might have been what we thought was the best practice 30 years ago, but they're not the best practice now. So I take your point, and I think how to be effective as a nonprofit, how to have an effective and high performing board evolves, just like everything evolves. What it takes in 2024 to be a high performing board, what it took 10 years ago, and what's going to take 10 years from now is all going to look different, because the world,
Absolutely.
everything we do is changing. The world is changing.
Absolutely.
And so if you're just joining us, my guest today is Hardy Smith, and we are talking about nonprofits, and in particular nonprofit boards, and kind of what makes them tick, what makes them work, what makes them effective. So please let us hear from you in the comments, or ask any questions of us, and we'll be glad to include you in the conversation. So I know I've heard you say this before, Hardy, which is, we're kind of repeating back, why don't those nonprofit boards, do what they're supposed to do? Kind of the lament, if you will, right? Of particularly nonprofit staff. Like, why don't those board members do what they're supposed? And I've even heard board members say, well, why doesn't the rest of the board, do what they're supposed to do? And my guess is that question really became part of the inspiration for your book, which I mentioned, which is Stop the Nonprofit Board Blame Game. So, why don't board members do what they're supposed to do, Hardy? Let's talk a little bit about that.
Well, and that you're exactly right, Alyce Lee. That question is the foundational question that ultimately created the book.
Right.
And I, in early in my consulting career, I was in a training session, and I share this story in the book, so I won't get into the full story, but I was in a training session, about 100 nonprofit CEOs.
Okay.
And I asked the question, what's your number one challenge? And they just like, and I promise you, this was not rehearsed. I wish I had been that much of a genius to be that brilliant to rehearse it, and I would have done video and everything.
Right.
But Alyce Lee, I asked the question, what's your number one challenge? And let's maybe as a group, maybe we can help solve someone's number one challenge. And the response, and just imagine me in front of a room of 100 people.
Right.
They just yelled out, it's those board members. Why don't board members do what they're supposed to do?
Right.
And the force of that, it pushed me back. It actually physically pushed me back.
Must have like taken
a little bit,
took the hair off the top, Hardy.
It just took the hair right off. Yeah, and it didn't come back. That's how profound it was. And so it took me a couple of seconds to just kind of, whoa, what just happened here?
Right.
And after there was a quiet,
mm-hmm.
and the people in the room started looking at each other, and there was this buzz, and in that moment, they all realized they had shared out loud to the effect they all had the number one problem,
Right.
same number one problem.
Right.
Board member engagement. Why don't they do what they're supposed to do?
Right.
Well, that question just started driving me, and that just being inquisitive and wanting to find an answer, that NASCAR mindset, as
I
I
was going
said,
to say, it was
start
driving
kicking
you,
in.
but I'm pumped.
That's right. And so I started doing the research, and the research eventually, became the content that's in the book.
Right.
And this is important. What I found out in my research, Alyce Lee, was focused on the board member perspective. So I wasn't asking professional staff, because there's a whole lot of literature that has been and still out there, great reading that's out there.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty much from the board staff perspective.
Yeah.
I looked for the board member perspective.
Right.
Tell me, Alyce Lee, as a board member, why aren't you meeting expectations? And then they told me. Right. And then so those were the nuggets of gold, because in the research that I did, the responses, my questions were very crude and rude, and I make no pretense about being a professional survey person, research person. That's all in the book too, full disclosure. But I asked open-ended questions, and I got back, of course, open-ended answers. Right. And other than the words being different, of course, the meanings were the same, unanimous. Right. So all of a sudden, I started identifying these issues.
Yeah.
And it at the top of the list, it was very easy to see. Let's go walk back just a little bit to best practices. Mm-hmm. It was very easy to see that nonprofit organizations continue to follow the same practices and same approaches, hoping for a different result.
Right.
And we've heard, that's a play on a quote we've heard a lot of, right? And,
exactly.
And
the definition.
we know the thinking around that.
Yeah.
So so you ask, why don't board members do what they're supposed to do? Well, to a degree, organizations are not getting the right people, number one.
Right.
So the recruiting practices of I better put a little disclaimer flag in here. Are there great organizations with great boards? Yes, absolutely. It's not 100% disastrous, but there's enough dysfunctionality that's out there. I imagine there's more than a few folks listening in the audience today to know exactly what we're talking about, and they feel the pain that we're sharing.
Yes.
So the challenge is, number one, your recruiting practices are setting you up in too many instances, Alyce Lee, for the frustration and dysfunctionality that you're experiencing.
Yeah.
That's point number one. Number two, the board members tell me the number one reason why board members don't do what they're supposed to do, the number one cause they're not meeting expectation, why good board members get turned off, number one is poor communication.
Yeah.
Now, let's jump into this just a little bit if we can.
Let me hold you there for just a second.
Go ahead.
Because I want to follow up on two things that you just said before we get into some of the detail on that. The first one is that I'm going to ask our show producer to drop something in the comments. If you're listening to this and you're thinking, well, maybe we need, how do we determine the effectiveness of our board? Maybe we think our board is effective and maybe it's not. How do we know? So there is a great resource from Board Source on how to kind of assess board effectiveness and roles and responsibilities. So I'm going to drop that in the comments in the chat, so that if you're having that thought right now as you listen to our conversation, there's a resource for you. The second thing that I want to say, and I've said this, I've presented this, I've written about it, preached about it, if you will. There's a big difference between a 25-year organization and a 1-year organization that's done the same thing 25 times. Yeah. And I think that really aligns with what you're saying, which is, this is kind of how we've been doing it, and we've had some success, and it's, gotten better in some areas and grown in other areas, and maybe we're bigger, stronger, faster 25 years later than we were in year one, but in a lot of instances we're pretty much the same organization. We've just done it 25 times. And I'm a big believer, and I know you are too, that there's a big difference between that one-year organization that's done the same thing over and over and over again and kind of expecting different results, and the organization that's 25 years down the line and has learned some things and has made some changes and has really invested in the success of its organization. And as I said at the start of the show, the number one investment that every nonprofit needs to make is in the effectiveness of its board. So with that thought in mind, let's talk a little bit about recruitment, and then let's talk a little bit about the communication piece, because I think I agree with you 100%. I just had a conversation yesterday and again this morning with a colleague, and we were talking about, I'll call it the care and feeding of board members. Like who we get, and then once we get them, sometimes we work really, really hard to get them, and then what do we do to help them be successful as a board member? So let's talk about the recruitment piece.
Absolutely.
What did your research, reveal? Like just, one or two things that you really feel like are critical to effective board member recruitment?
Well, number one, I think it's important for everyone who's in our audience today to understand every organization is different.
Yes.
Every organization is different. So
right.
the needs of a board, that the ask of a board for one group may be totally different than another. So who might be an ideal board candidate for one group may be totally different from another.
Right.
So don't get, just understand everyone is unique. So all of these situations need to take with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
And evaluate, okay, how does this relate to my particular organization?
Yeah.
But overall, when think about number one, hopefully everyone in our audience has a strategic plan. Okay. Hopefully, and that's a whole nother topic, I know.
But that's a good
today,
one.
for today, we're gonna go with it. Hopefully, you've all got a strategic plan. Hopefully, there's some aspirational goals for your organization. Yeah. Hopefully, you understand the impact that you want your organization to have. My suggestion on first step of recruiting is to recruit to your mission statement, recruit to your strategic plan,
right,
and recruit to your aspirational goals. And the goals to that first year organization, totally different, Alyce Lee, like you said, as opposed to the organization that's been around for 25 years or maybe even more.
Right.
So who you look for is going to be different. And
let me just throw that out there.
Sure.
I think that's a big takeaway, to recruit to your mission and recruit to your vision, to your strategic plan, right?
Yes.
And let me throw out too, that as I listen to you, what I think I'm also hearing you say, and it kind of ties in with my, one organization, 25 years time, is recruit also to the stage of development that your organization is in, right? So to your point about, recruiting, every organization is different. So if you're 5 years in, you're a startup, you're a 5-year, you're 25 years, you're, depending on where you are in the life cycle of your organization, that can have a big impact as well. So, totally. The takeaway that we'll highlight here is to recruit to your mission, recruit to your strategic plan, and recruit to the life, where you are in the life cycle of your organization.
Totally. A next
Okay.
step would be consider, I like sports. I like college sports, and we'll remain nameless and affiliations here. But I know there are other people that may be on this live stream today that have favorite teams, and they have aspirations for their favorite teams, and they want their teams to win championships, and the coaches want to win championships, and the school wants to win championships. Well, teams and programs who want to win championships, who do they recruit? They recruit championship players.
There you go.
So, excuse me, we know, when you follow college football, there's a prototype of what a championship quarterback looks like.
Right.
Physically, all the attributes, everything, the game, the football IQ, everything. And it's every single position.
Right.
And just like on a championship college football team, championship boards, what attributes do you need?
Mm-hmm.
What are the personality traits that you want your board members to have? The skills, then the experience. And I'll share a quick aside here. I'm not a believer in, Alyce Lee, if you want something done, who do you get? A busy person. Well, I don't believe in just going out and getting a busy person, because obviously there are people that get things done. So conversely, I would encourage organizations in the recruiting phase.
Right.
Don't look out there and say, wow, Alyce Lee is on 5 different boards. She's probably really a good person to have. Now, does this, think about, I want to challenge you here. Does this really make sense?
Yeah.
So Alyce Lee, she's already on 5 different boards.
Right.
Each one of those boards are all local boards. Each one of those boards meets once a month. That is 5 meetings a month she's already committed to. Those meetings, travel time, go to the meeting, travel back to work time. You're probably talking 4 or 5 hours times 5 in 1 week. How many hours is that?
I know.
You've already sucked up half of a work week, and you want her to take on 1 more.
Yeah. Now, no, let me jump in and say I agree with you there. I agree with you. And even if some of those boards are state or natural, or they meet quarterly, or they're governed, or there's a governance board and there's an advisory board, no matter what that is, you're still looking for people that I would say, number one and number 2, have the time and the passion for the mission of the organization, and then bring that expertise based on your strategic plan and whatnot. I was just thinking, as you were talking about, the football team, the quarterback, we just saw the Olympics. We saw some amazing men and women, amazing athletes, that were doing I'm missing the Olympics, because that was so fun to watch them, and so inspiring to watch them. So, thinking about our Women Wednesday audience today, there's just so many people doing good work in your community, and some of them could be ideal board members, and some of them may not be. So
absolutely,
let's just, keep that in mind. So recruit to your mission, recruit to the strategic plan. Let's talk a little bit about the communication piece, because I agree with you. I think sometimes, and I've seen this in the work that I do with boards, is we work really, really hard to recruit somebody, and we bring them onto the board, and then we kind of throw them in the deep end of the pool, right? We kind of give them the sink or swim approach to becoming a knowledgeable and successful board member. So what's been your experience with this issue, about which board members have told you, the communication just hasn't been that good? So what does that mean, and how do we fix it?
Well, I can just hear our audience now. So I know we've probably got a number of nonprofit professionals And thank you all for listening in. And I know what's in your mind. Okay, great. Hardy's he's gonna fix our communication, because we do communicate, Hardy. I'll let you know that right away.
Right.
It's not about more. It's about better. It's about being effective, and effective communication. Underline the word effective.
Mm-hmm.
That's the key.
Right.
So think about, here are the issues that board members shared with me. Number one, the timing. So let's just use your board meeting information as one example. Okay, when do they get their agenda packet? They get it the day of the meeting. It's at their place at the table. Do they get it 24 hours in advance? Do they get it a week in advance? Is there a possibility there's going to be a particularly sensitive issue, a challenging issue, a key financial decision to be made, that would it be beneficial, especially for some board members who might be on that on the list of challenging, they're going to ask the tough questions.
Right.
Would it be helpful to communicate with them in advance? So timing is a critical piece. Number two, the messaging itself. Are you clear and concise in your communications?
Right.
Think about who your board members are. So probably they are very busy people. They have a full schedule. Their inbox is overloaded. They have more messages. And so are you able to break through the clutter of all the messages they're receiving from every place they get messages from? And is your messaging compelling enough so that they will open your email? And I've got a hint for you, and Alyce Lee and our audience. If you're sending emails to your board members and they're not opening the emails, they don't consider your message important enough to fool with.
There you go.
So that's a challenge that you need to evaluate.
Right.
How can you be a better communicator? And that is one of the, I spend a lot of time in the book showing how to do that.
Right. So that's a homework, right? Let me just throw that out. And we do have a comment that I want to respond to. So that's a homework assignment, is to just go back and look at the open rate in your emails to board members and see how you're doing. Are they opening it 50% of the time? Are they opening it 80% of the time? Are 100% of the board members opening it? Are there 2 board members that never open it? And if so, if they're effective board members in other ways, then how are you communicating with them differently? So anyway, I think that's a good takeaway and a good homework assignment. So I want to, let's go back just a minute to the recruitment issue, because Summer Boggs joined us and she's got a comment, and she says, I've heard that recruitment is often that same handful of people that continue to get asked to serve on, more than one local board. How can we ensure we're sharing the wealth and engaging a variety of community members, not just those few highly recruited individuals? And I think that's a great question, Summer. You're right. I call them the usual suspects, right? The ones that everybody thinks everybody's got to have on their board. So how would you answer that? How do they find those other people that could be great board members, but maybe aren't as highly visible as some of the usual suspects?
Well, number one, Summer, here's a virtual high five to you. So thank you so very much. You get the first star of the day for just an absolutely awesome question. Summer, here's the answer. You got to work harder. You got to work harder. Now, why do we go to the usual suspects?
Right.
Why do you think that is?
They're easier to see, right? They're right in front of us.
Easier to see. Everyone knows them. It's easier. They're easier to see. Yeah. So my suggestion is you got to work harder. Now, here's what happens. Summer, you're going to launch me off. How many days is this show? Because I could go for a while.
Right.
So Summer, think about this. I don't know what your practices are, but there are way too many organizations. Your annual meeting is in January, and that's when you're going to fill there are 3 board seats that are going to rotate off. Right. Because you do have board term limits. Thank goodness. I know that. We're talking perfect world here.
Right.
So 3 board members are going to rotate off. So you know that. And when did you know? Was this a surprise? No. You knew the date they were rolling off when they first came on the board.
Yeah.
So you've had maybe a year, 2 years, maybe 3 years to think about these 3 rotating off board
Who's
members
next?
in January 2025.
Yeah.
So what typically happens? Well, the December board meeting, December, that's the holidays. And really, we don't have much of an agenda at the December board meeting. That's really more of a social, and it's kind of a fun thing. So November, that's Thanksgiving. And remember, that's college football time too. In October, we've got Halloween. So really, that's where the board agenda is focused. So then we get into September. September is the start of school. So we can't really, our board members aren't really focused on board. So here's the bottom line. Spend time in advance.
Yeah.
I'm suggesting you should be developing, going back to college football or college sports of any kind. And my favorite, most successful coaches are recruiting. It is 24/7, 7 days a week, 365. It never ends.
Yeah.
So think about maintaining a list.
Yeah.
Who are prospective board candidates for future board consideration.
Yeah.
And start identifying those that meet all your qualifications. You're not asking them yet, but you're starting to move them into committees, committee chairs, event chairs, project chairs, and you're developing along as you go.
Yeah.
So that by the time that January annual meeting comes around, you're not sitting there the night before the meeting. Oh my goodness,
right.
Who in the world are we going to nominate to be on the board? Because it happens way too often. And by working in advance, Alyce Lee, you can think a little bit with some creativity. Instead of going to your usual suspects, instead of going to the usual suspects to be board members, how about going to the usual suspects and asking them for a recommendation for someone in their company or someone they know to be a part of your board?
Yeah.
And then, try that.
I love that tip. As you were describing that, I can think of an executive director that I've known for years. And she had a list all the time, just a rolling list of people that in the day-to-day work of leading the organization and working with the board, her antennas were always up and meeting with people and coffee and just getting to know. And if they could serve on a committee or be involved in some way, that was a great kind of cultivation. But I think your point is well taken. And I appreciate you asking the question, because I think that the answer, Hardy, as you said, it's a year-round effort. And it's something that board members need to be thinking about on a year-round basis, as well as staff. Yes. I mean, kind of one of the most important things I think a board member needs to do is to find their replacement, right? And by that, I mean somebody engaged, passionate with the time, willing to commit, and asking some of those more high-profile usual suspects for their recommendations. That really opens the door to a whole nother group of people. Hopefully it opens the door to a more diverse group of people. Boards in the U.S. tend to be overwhelmingly white and overwhelmingly 60 up. So we know we've got some big work to do there to diversify that and have our boards be more reflective of our communities and of the people that we serve. So I love that. So thank you, Summer. We appreciate your question, and love to hear from anybody else that's watching live. And thank you for that. So I want to drop another resource in the comments. This is from the Council on Foundations, and it's another one about kind of self-assessment and just knowing where you are in order to kind of take some of these ideas from your book and from your comments and from this discussion that you can use to elevate the capacity of your board. So I'm going to drop that in the comments so that if you're watching this after this airs, there'll be some additional resources for you. So let's talk about, I'm going to call it the look before you leap, right? So, what did you hear from board members in researching your book about what they need to know before they agree to serve. Maybe the questions they didn't think to ask, or that maybe they did ask. I don't know. What did you learn from board members about their conversations with nonprofits before they agreed to be on the board?
My suggestion, based on board member feedback and input,
Mm-hmm.
Alyce Lee, is to get clarity on expectations.
Yeah, there you go.
And there's a problem, and this goes directly back to poor communication. Let's just, we were in the last board meeting, we were talking about Summer maybe being just next great board member. Yeah, everybody really thought Summer, yeah, she's really going to be good. And so you're going to reach out, you're the board chair, or maybe you're the executive director, and they're going to reach out to Summer and, hey, Summer, what about being on our board? And really, because the deadline is really on top of us, and we really need a yes from Summer pretty quick.
We're stressing out, Summer.
And we really don't have anybody else other than Summer. She is really kind of the only candidate we have, to be honest about it. But the point is, Summer is so overwhelmed because ego comes in. She's a human, and her ego. She's been flattered, and wow, this is a prestigious organization. This would really help my career. I would really like to have my name on that letterhead. This is fabulous. So immediately she says yes.
Yeah.
Well,
without the conversation first about expectations.
Here's the reality.
Yeah.
What does Summer need to know? Well, what are the expectations of the board members? How often does it meet? How much time does it take? Do I need to do fundraising? Do I need to make a personal contribution? And she should have a list of questions.
Right.
Now, if the nonprofit representative doing the recruiting were doing their proper job, they would be explaining, they would have answers to all, they would anticipate that Summer, being as sharp as she is, she would have all these questions, and they would be willing to answer the questions without the questions even being asked.
Yes.
However, there's a big but.
Yeah.
All too often,
doesn't always happen.
That expectation is not forthcoming. Why is that? Board giving you the answer. Why is that? They're afraid she won't say yes.
There you go.
Oh gosh, and so they're more interested in getting Summer to yes.
Right.
And all too often, what happens is organizations are getting that board candidate to the altar. They say the yes, I do, and then they'll talk about what's expected later.
Yeah.
Now,
it's such a
relationships.
It's such a pitfall. And I've seen great organizations make that mistake because they're so excited that Summer's interested, or that so-and-so is interested and has a passion for the mission. They get so excited and they just really want to get that person involved. So I appreciate that. I've seen board members just as excited, as the staff, to say, oh my gosh, this person wants to, would entertain this idea, and they get real excited about it. But I agree with you that the more candor you have before even extending the invitation, the better. And I would also say, to your point, savvy board members, people that have been on boards before, they're going to come to this conversation knowing what those questions are. What are you expecting of me? What will be my role? Where are you in the life cycle of the organization? Is there a strategic plan? May I see a copy? And number one, why do you want me? Why do you want me? What is it that I bring? That's a great question for a prospective board member to ask, and for a nonprofit board or staff member doing the recruitment to have an answer to that. Summer, we want you to consider joining our board because you know a lot about X, Y, and Z, because of your experience in this with this issue because you have a child with autism, and that's who we seek to serve, or whatever it is, right? So the look before you leap, I think, is really important. Defining those expectations. Thanks, Rosemary. Rosemary Prince just joined us. Thanks, Rosemary. Defining expectations and conversations before committing. That just sums it up perfectly, Rosemary. Thank you so much for that. I agree. Okay, so why why is it such a struggle, Hardy? I mean, because I can think of so many great organizations, and I know you can too. Great people serving on boards, great staff leaders who understand everything we're talking about. Yes. People could be listening right now going, yep, I got it. I know, I got it. And yet, going back to what I said at the very beginning, the capacity of a board, the effectiveness of a board is directly correlated to the capacity of its board. The nonprofit and the board, they go together. So why is it such a challenge? What else would you say? What else have you learned in doing this work and researching your book that you would add? Maybe a third key thing that you would add to this conversation.
One of the most important takeaways from the research and the responses that I got back,
right,
is that nonprofit professionals are exactly that. If you're talking about staff and you're talking about board members, who's the professional in the conversation? It's the nonprofit professional. They are the ones who are supposed to know what needs to be done.
Yeah.
Here's one example. Board Source. I know you follow Board Source like I do. Right. Board Source has done an amazing piece of work over a number of years. Their report, Leading with Intent.
Yes.
And I always look forward to the data that comes out with that comes out from the report. And without fail, and Leading with Intent, if our audience members aren't familiar with it, it's really a report card on some key questions around board engagement, board performance.
Right. We'll get that added to the comments. Let me just jump in and say, We'll add a link to that in the comments. Go ahead.
And one of my favorite questions, because it's just me wanting to go so hardy, is that how do you, and again, this is asking staff professionals, how do you grade your board members on the knowledge of their roles and responsibilities?
Mm-hmm.
And without fail, it's usually around a C. Some years, sometimes C minus. It could be a C plus, but it's never really what I would consider good. And so wait a minute. Whose responsibility is it?
Yeah.
You've asked me to serve on your board.
Uh-huh.
I'm coming to your board. Am I supposed to come in knowing the roles and responsibilities? I'm supposed to already know that? Or is it possible that the staff professionals, emphasis on professionals, are they supposed to be providing a proper orientation, ongoing training,
mm-hmm.
to help me make sure I understand my proper role and responsibilities? And so the point of this is, over and over and over and over, staff professionals are being critical of their board members for not knowing what the heck it is they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
Would you hire somebody in your business and say, okay, here's your hat, here's your apron, go out here, have at it? And what am I here for? What am I doing? Would you do that? No, that's just ridiculous. That's what we do in all too many
Too often.
cases in the world of nonprofits. So that's just one example. So as the professional, you've got to take the initiative and make sure, look in the mirror. How can you improve your relationship with your board, relationships with your board members? What is it that they need from you? Well, what is it that you're wanting your board to do? And what is it that you need to do to enable them to be able to help you in your mission? Does that make sense?
It does. And so what I say and to the clients that I'm working with, particularly executive directors, and I know Kelly Oddie and I have talked about this on the show before, and in the column, Notes on Nonprofits, the column is that on top of everything the executive director or CEO needs to know about running the day-to-day operations of the organization, you yourself really need to become an expert in nonprofit governance, because you're right. You're that CEO, that executive director, you're the hub to the wheel, and your board members are all those spokes, right? And unless you are the subject matter expert in what effective governance is and how board members can and should be effective in their role, you more often than not are the person who brings that knowledge and that expertise to the table. And I think the challenge to a lot of CEOs and executive directors is what I just said. They're running the day-to-day operations, and it's really easy, to be focused there. That's their job, and then get, kind of sucked in, and then that leaves very little time sometimes for that governance piece. And I know in the work that I do with nonprofits, one of the biggest challenges to CEOs is doing both, is overseeing the day-to-day operations and carving out a big amount of your time to focus on the board, to focus on the knowledge that you need to help them be successful, and to communicate with them, and to engage them, and to support them, and to help them help the organization. And that's why this work ain't easy, right? Because it's really two jobs in one, right? The care and feeding and nurturing and support of a board, because you are the nonprofit professional, and running the day-to-day operations of the organization. So I don't envy the role that executive directors and CEOs play because of how hard this work is. And it's hard to be a good board member too, right, Hardy? I mean, you've served on boards. I've served on boards. It's hard. It's hard work. Maybe that's it. Maybe there's just a big misnomer that being on a board, hopefully it's fun. Hopefully it's rewarding. If it's not fun and rewarding, people won't do it. I don't care how great it is, right? So it's got to be fun. It's got to be rewarding, and it's important work. So we got about 5 minutes left. I knew our time would fly by, Hardy. What's your you and I could just talk about this for days. I don't know if anybody would listen, Hardy, but you and I could talk about this for days.
We would have fun.
We would. What's your number one advice to help nonprofits strengthen the effectiveness of their board?
Hands down, especially considering the environment that we're in and will be for until the end of time. Maybe pre-pandemic, we didn't really accept that we're in a constant world of change, disruption, and uncertainty. The pandemic, that and economic downturns and recessions, that was nothing new. We've always been in a world of change, disruption, and uncertainty, and we will be forevermore in that world. To deal with those challenges and the needs, we know that regardless of the mission, regardless of the cause, the need is growing for, I guess, every nonprofit that I hear from. The need is growing greater than they can deal with.
Absolutely.
And the resources we know are just because of competition, because of the economy, whatever the reason is,
Right.
resources are becoming tighter and tighter.
Yep.
To deal with all of this, my number one, hands down suggestion, Alyce Lee, for all of our friends in the nonprofit world, is to utilize your board as a high value asset.
Right.
And you can create and develop a high value asset board, again, that's unique to your particular organization, so that the board becomes the board does those board things, the fiduciary responsibilities, the governance practices, all of those things. Maybe they're involved in fundraising, maybe they're not. Well, that's up to you and the organization and whatever the board members are willing to take on. But here's the key point here. Utilize your board so that you are getting the benefit of the strategic thinking and the strategic value and the visionary abilities of your board members. You can help do that by making your meetings matter, so that your board members feel like when they come to your board meeting, they are accomplishing something.
Time well
spent. They have invested their time that's going to produce a positive impact and help the mission happen. If you can do that, create that environment, a positive board experience for your board, I can guarantee you, you will have a positive, productive, and fully engaged board that will help lead your organization to places you've never imagined.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that, because I teach and preach about that a lot, about how to make board meetings matter, how to revamp the agenda, how to, quite frankly, get rid of old business and new business and make sure you're really talking about what you need to be talking about. We could do a whole nother hour or more just on that, right? So the takeaway is, and I love how you describe it as a high value asset, right? It's like the engine to the car, going back to the NASCAR analogy, right? That if you're not changing the oil and changing the tires and taking care of that engine, I don't care what kind of driver you got behind the wheel, the car's not going to get around the track. And it's, a lot, I mean, you can call it capacity building, you can call it infrastructure, you can call it whatever, internal focus. But I think sometimes we're running around that track so fast that we overlook that. We don't stop at the gas station when we need to. We let those tires get a lot of, wear down that tread before we finally change those tires. We talked about term limits. I mean, I think it's a good analogy for the care and feeding, support, education, nurturing of a board. Because again, I think it's a great way to wrap up. The more you can do and the more you do to help educate, inspire, and communicate with your board in a way that helps them be effective, it's going to pay dividends over and over and over and over and over again. And that 1 year organization, it will become the 25-year organization instead of just being a 1 year organization that does the same thing over and over. So I've dropped another resource from the Giving Institute about nonprofit effectiveness. We will also get the link in there about the Leading with Intent, which I think they're publishing that every 2 years. I think they do that one, Leading with Intent, every 2 years. If you're an executive director and you've not read that, I would encourage you to do it. There's also a lot of great information, a very disturbing information about the lack of tenure and how many people are leaving the sector on the executive nonprofit staff leadership component of it, as well as what's happening with boards. So our time is up, Hardy. I want to thank you so much for being with me and for being my friend and colleague. If you haven't read Stop the Nonprofit Board Blame Game, I'm going to put in my plug and say it's well worth the time and effort and investment to do that. I was very honored to be asked by Hardy to put in a testimonial that's in the book. I was happy to do that. So Rosemary's saying, thank you. Great to see you both. Thanks, Rosemary. Appreciate that. So check out the book. It's all part of maybe that's the last homework assignment, right? Invest in your knowledge about boards and board effectiveness so that no matter whether you're wearing a board member hat or a staff hat, you're able to be an advocate and an ambassador for board effectiveness, because, the better the board, probably the more effective, not probably, the more effective and better your organization will be at accomplishing its mission. And we need these organizations to be doing that and to be doing their good work. Our next show will be September the 10th. That's the second Tuesday of the month. Barbara Boone with Leadership Tallahassee will be my guest. If you've been in a leadership program in your community, you know how effective they are. And it's a great follow-up to today's conversation just about leadership in the sector, leadership at the 30,000 foot level, as well as at the community level. So Hardy, thank you.
Thank you, Alyce Lee. Thank you.
I appreciate you being with us, and we'll get this out, everybody. And if you have been able to join us today, thanks for being with us. And please feel free to share this link with your board. That might also be a great takeaway from today, just as a way to spark a conversation within your nonprofit about how do we have the most effective board that we can have. So thanks, everybody, for being with us, and we'll see you next month.